Hi, welcome to How to Check Visual Acuity. My name's David Keegan. I'm an academic family doctor here at the University of Calgary. So there's a whole bunch of times when you're going to want to check people's visual acuity as part of preventive health care, but also sometimes when they have like an eye injury or there's some sort of eye condition that they have, like a sore eye or a red eye of some type or other. Being able to check the visual acuity in a careful, controlled way really helps you understand what kind of disease somebody might have or just in general how their vision is. And the key thing is doing it in the right way so that it's reliable, so that the visual acuity you measure can be relied upon by yourself later or by other people later who are caring for the same patient, so that you can track improvements or worsening, or so that we can all sort of understand what the visual acuity the patient had at the beginning. So here's how you do it. First of all, you'll be familiar with this chart, a Snellen chart. It starts with the big E on front and goes down to the letters. So you'll notice that there's numbers on the side, and they all start with the number 20. And so if your metric is 6.1 meters. So the patient whose vision you're checking has to be 20 feet away from the chart, and not about 20 feet. You should actually measure it out and have exactly that marked on the ground where that line is for the person to line up with their toes. So when they're 20 feet away, you get them to cover up one eye. Now, if you're really stuck, you can use their hand, but the problem is people can peek through their fingers, just like I'm doing right now. And so instead, you should better have like a paddle or a piece of paper, some sort of card, something like that is handy. I find actually, frankly, a prescription pad might be handy if you still have prescription pads or something like that. So you get them to physically cover up their eye, one of their eyes, and then with their other eye that's open, you get them to read from the top slowly. Now what you've got to do is you've got to be watching the chart and watching the patient at the same time and kind of glancing back and forth. After a while, it's kind of handy if you have this memorized. It's very handy, because you want to make sure that the patient is still doing things properly, just to make sure they didn't drop their hand and are using two eyes instead of one, that kind of thing. So you get them to read from the top. And the number that you will score, eventually, you're going to give a short number. It indicates the best that they could read. And so if they can only read E, for instance, the top E, the number next to that says 2200. So 20 over 200. What this means is that this person can see at 20 feet what a person with normal vision can see at 200 feet. So that's pretty bad. If that's all they can see, this is pretty bad. Pause. My eraser, where's my eraser? There it is. Got the eraser. Sorry about that. Now let's say the person can read down to this line, FP, and they get it accurate. Well, then they're at 20 over 100. If somebody can read down to the next line, TOZ, they're 2070, and so on. You get the picture. So normal, is kind of defined as 20 over 20. DEFPOTEC, DEFPOTEC. So DEFPOTEC, that's a phrase you'll just kind of get used to and remember. It's quite handy, because if sometimes you have somebody, you just sort of check. Can you read just above the red line? And if they can read that off, great. You know that you're good. But normally you start from the top and work down. So let's say if somebody can read DEFPOTEC without any errors, then they get 20 over 20. And let's say they cannot read any letters here. So the next line, LEFODPCT, let's say they can't read any letters there at all. Well, then this is their score, 2020, because they got to the 2020 line, DEFPOTEC, but didn't get any of the 2015. So that's in a basic form, which is the line that somebody can read all the letters. That's their score. The smallest letters that they can read, that's their score. But what do you do though if, yes, somebody can read this DEFPOTEC, and they can read some but not all of the next letters? Well, that gets a bit trickier. So let's just go back up to the top of the eye chart, and I'll give you an example. Let's say you got somebody here and their vision is like this. This is what they can see. They read E, F, P, and they say, I'm not sure what that is, and O and Z. Well, this is at the 2070 line, 2070, and because they made one mistake or couldn't get one, is 2070 minus 1. If similarly, they could only read this, E, F, P, and then they say, I'm not sure, O, and they say it's P, but in fact it's a Z, or if you're in the United States, a Z. So they've got two errors on a line that is 2070 minus 2. Now you're only allowed to have two errors. If you're further on down here, and let's say you're on this line, and they can read EFP, TOZ, or Z, LPED, and they go Q, E, L, Q, D, and so they only get 2 correct on this line. Their score is not, so you might think their score is 2040 minus 3, but no, 3 mistakes is just too many. You get 2 mistakes only. Their score is the line above, 20 over 50. That's their score. And once somebody's got several errors in one line, you basically stop there. You usually don't go to the next line, because if they got a whole bunch of errors on this line, then they haven't got a hope on this line. So to recap, you get them to read usually from the top down. You're looking for which lines can they fully do as farthest down. And then if they hit a line where they've got some errors, as long as the errors are only up to 2, they get that line minus 2 or minus 1. Or if they get more than 2 errors, let's say they have 3 errors, like in this case, they don't score this line at all. Their score is 20 over 50 for this line. Then, so let's say this is somebody's right vision. And then you do the same thing again for the left. So let's say somebody can read all the way down here, but can read all this except for this one issue here. I want you to look at it and think, what would be their score for their left eye? Just to help you, this is the 2050 line. This is the 2040 line. This is the 2030 line. And they can't read anything more below it. So this is all they can read. What would be their score? So the answer is the furthest lowest line, where at maximum they have 2 errors, is this one. So it's 2030, 20 over 30, minus 1. Because they have 1 error, 1 letter they couldn't see properly. Great. And then you usually repeat the vision for both eyes. That's more for driving purposes, to make sure somebody can drive properly. If you're looking for somebody who's got like a red eye in one eye, you want to compare the two and just sort of see where they are, you may not have to actually do the dual vision, unless, again, you're checking to make sure they can drive safely. And the regulations will vary by province and state and country. So that's a quick spin on how do you check visual acuity. But what if somebody can't read letters? What if you've got like a 4-year-old kid who knows some of their letters but not all? Then what do you do? Well, the good news is we've got the same thing in what's called the kindergarten test chart. So the kindergarten test chart works on the same principles, except for instead of being letters, they're symbols or pictures. Now the pictures are pretty clear, I have to say, but maybe with one exception. So sailboat, circle, plus sign. This is a flag. So in some countries, this will be obvious as a flag. In other countries, not so obvious. Star, heart, and so on. So these are all calibrated the same way. And so you can check a child's vision the same way using this kind of eye chart as well. So for instance, if you had a child who could read down to here, but then beyond that couldn't read any, then the visual acuity at this line is 20 over 50. So this person's visual acuity here would be 20 over 50 minus 1. And if for their other eye, they could read this, they could see these pictures and identify them correctly, then they would be 20 over 40 minus 2. Now, if you happen to have a child with you who doesn't want to be examined and doesn't give you any answers at all, that doesn't mean that they don't have good vision. It just means that, welcome to pediatric care, that sometimes you have to kind of work and set up an environment so that the child will be quite happy, hopefully, to be willing to do this test. So just because they don't answer doesn't mean they don't know anything, but it could. So you also don't want to be lulled into thinking that just because somebody's not providing you answers is that they're uncooperative. It may actually be they don't have any vision. You'll notice that particularly if you have a child who has good vision in one eye when they cover up one eye with a card or whatever, but then the other eye they have almost no vision, that's pretty reliable because the child was cooperative and stuff moments ago, but not with their other eye. They can sometimes get quite upset with that, of course. So you got to be on the watch out for these things. So it's just a little bit more challenging in kids versus, say, older children and adults. So the bottom line is you want to make sure to what line down the side on either the children's chart or the regular adult chart, somebody can read with at most 2 errors. If they have no errors, you just give them the score for the corresponding 20 over 40. Or if they have errors, you give 20 over 40 minus the number of errors they've made. But if they've made 3 or more errors, they don't get that line, they get the line above. And that's how you measure visual acuity. Thanks very much.